Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 3 of the Stand Up for Grain Safety week. It is brought to you by the Alliance. The Alliance is a partnership with OSHA, National Grain and Feed Association, Grain Handling Safety Council, and the Grain Elevator and Processing Society. My name is Barb Grove, and I am your moderator this week. I am the Quality Systems Manager for Central Valley Ag and a founder of this event. This event started 8 years ago and has just grown ever since between the partnerships from all the people that are out here looking to bring safety training and awareness to you. So right now we have 139 participants on. That is so wonderful to see. It means people are really taking advantage of the opportunity that we are bringing. Some things to expect today. We are going to have our presentation, of course. We are going to offer you some resources. We will have interaction out there, chats and things like that. So we want to make sure everybody stays prepared. If you have any technical difficulties today, go ahead and email grainsafety2010@gmail.com. and we will post that in the chat. Again, email that if you have any problems with your technical things that you're seeing and hearing today, or you can direct message Salah in the participants list. He is our Zoom master today, so can help you out with that. So our learning session today is brought to you by Grain Elevator and Processing Society and the Grain Handling Safety Council, with a lot of generous support from our sponsors. I want to say if you haven't registered yet for the rest of this week's event, there's still time to do so. Use the link that we're throwing out there in the chat box, and you would go out to standupforgrainsafety.org. You know, as this week is dedicated to safety, we just want to make sure to remind everybody of our rights and responsibilities. Employers are required to provide a safe and healthy workplace, free of known hazards, even if you are not subject to OSHA enforcement. As an employee, you have the right to a safe and healthy workplace, free of hazards, and to be able to report concerns without fear of retaliation. What that's saying is we all should be working together to look out for each other and provide the best space for everybody. So these learning sessions would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors. You saw them on the screens earlier as you were waiting to come in, but I'm going to mention them again because a lot of work goes into these to be able to provide you with the free resources that we have. So we want to mention them again: Bartlett Grain Company, Central State Center for Agriculture, Safety and Health, or CS-CASH, Central Valley Ag, Grain Elevator and Processing Society, JEEPS, Grain and Feed Association of Illinois, the Grain Journal, Grain Elevator and Processing Society, I mentioned, Iowa State University, Kansas State University, Lamar Advertising Company, National Grain and Feed Association, NGFA, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, University of Nebraska Medical Center, and the Union Pacific Railroad. So let's get going in that chat box and let's show our appreciation by putting up that clapping emoji for all of the people that are bringing you these things today. So we'll be posting a link in the chat box later at the end of the session for a certificate of attendance after the event. And you can also recognize your stand-up participation and receive a stand-up certificate by registering on the standupforgrainsafety.org website. The session is being recorded, and so that recording should be available within about 24 to 48 hours, again, out on the Stand Up for Grain Safety website. So if things got busy at your facility and you didn't have as many people joining as you had hoped to today, you can certainly pop back out there and utilize this as, a training talk at your location later this week, or they can log in when they have some time. So again, we encourage participation by polls and chat box, Q&As, and we want to hear from you. So during the session, be sure to put comments and questions in the chat box, participate in our polls and our chat storms and our surveys. At the end of the session today, when you exit Zoom, there'll be a little survey that pops up. And what we're encouraging you to do is to complete that, to share your thoughts and suggestions for future stand-up topics. We want to make sure that we are providing the trainings that people want to see. All right, so let's start your participation by telling everybody where you're from. Let's get that chat box active. Excellent. Look at that. Looks like we are coming from all around the country. We may have a few out there overseas. Thank you so much. And while we're doing that also, we want to know how many people may be watching with you. We want to make sure that we get record of everybody that's out there. So please take the poll that's on your screen and tell us how many people are watching with you. All right, so while we're doing that, I am going to get going today and introduce our speaker in our session. Our session today is safety planning for emergencies. And our speaker today is Dr. Carol Jones. Dr. Jones is the owner and engineer at CL Jones Consulting LLC, which provides grain handling and storage engineering training and forensic services. She's also a professor emeritus with Oklahoma State University in biosystems and ag engineering, joining OSU in 2002 after a career in production ag and materials handling design. Dr. Jones provides training and engineering information in grain handling, quality preservation, and safety. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Carol Jones.
Good morning, everyone, or happy afternoon if you're not in our time zone. So it's a pleasure to be with you today, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm going to turn my PowerPoint on and share it with you, and I'm going to push some buttons here, and we're all going to hope this works great. Barb, what do you see?
Yep, I see your screen. Go ahead, Carol.
Oh,
Thank
that
you.
is awesome. Okay. As Barb said, our session today is about safety planning for emergencies. And sometimes we think of this as being a one-time and we're done operation, but that is not the case. As you go through any of our presentations this week and training that you have at your facility, remember this is all part of a system. Everything you do has to do with two things, profit and safety. I've long said that everyone has two goals in mind. One's to go home to the people that we care about at the end of the day, and the other is to make profit, have some money. So one doesn't happen without the other. If we don't go home at the end of the day, the profit doesn't matter, and we're not going to make much profit if we have an accident at work and things go really wrong. So those are independent or not independent, and everything we do in our daily work has to do with safety and I would say planning for emergencies. So let's just get started here. Okay, some things to think about and do. This is more than just a thinking process. There's some actions required. The planning has to be very intentional. It's not something that happens by accident. We need to have a plan and work our plan. We need a plan. We need an assessment to know where we're at. We need to know what training we need and absolutely get that training. And then we need to assess what did we learn in that training? Maybe we need a different kind of training, or maybe we need to repeat it more frequently. So we need to plan again, and then we need to train again, and then we need to plan again. I think you get the message here, rinse and repeat. We are never, ever done with this process. Some things that we need to prepare for, and this comes from history of accidents that happen in our facilities. We hear a lot about entrapment, engulfment, and that's certainly something that we need to work with, because it happens from poor grain quality. And if you have poor grain quality, there goes your profit also. Entanglement, someone's forgot to lock out, tag out, or maybe it's not a company policy that you do that, and that's something that needs to be visited. Explosion and fire comes from housekeeping and also poor grain quality. Beam collapse is a maintenance, structural integrity issue. Poor grain quality, sometimes, particularly with soybeans, can cause some structural problems. Chemical spill is an employee performance and maintenance issue. Weather events are out of our control, but we need to know how to respond to those. In Oklahoma, as many of you know, we had some very critical weather events a couple of weeks ago that ended up in 200 fires in the state. So something that doesn't happen very often, but we need to be prepared. What are we going to do if it does happen? Health conditions, hopefully this never happens, and it is pretty much out of your control, but employees need to communicate, and if they do have a health condition or a health concern, management needs to know about that. We need to know what happens and what do we need to respond to if something happens on the workplace. And then workplace violence. If I were giving this 10 years ago, this wouldn't even be a bullet point, but we can't ignore it now. As you know, in the news, this happens often, hopefully not in your facilities, but employee communication is just so important, and knowing where your employees are in their daily life and if they have any concerns. So that's probably not a complete list, but those are ones that came to mind as I was thinking about this presentation. So let's look at the major contributors to accidents in the workplace and things that we can prepare for. Grain going out of condition is the #1 reason that people go in grain bins and have an accident. If the grain is in good condition, it comes out of the bin easily. We don't need to help it. We don't need to go in the bin. But when it goes out of condition, it develops clumps, it sticks to walls, it makes bridges, shelves. We have poor air quality. It's a very dangerous environment, and we need to take some safety precautions, or maybe find another method of remedying the problem without going in the bin. Equipment wear and tear, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later in the presentation, but that is a maintenance issue. It's also a training issue. Do your employees know what to look for in equipment? Does it sound different? Do they see something, a bolt missing, or do they see recorrugation in steel bins? All of that is very important that they report it, because that's the start of a bigger problem. A lack of training. We don't like to train for emergencies because we don't really want to think about them. It's not something that's fun to do. So we need to make a priority on safety, and part of that priority includes training our people and ourselves. So where to start? Know your people and know your facility. This is an industry that never standardized on any kind of one particular facility. There's as many kinds of facilities out there as there are people that work there. And so you know your facility better than anyone. You're the expert in your facility. So think about these topics here as it pertains to your facility, and what would you do? What would you do if a bin fails? That's not something that you knew was going to happen when you came to work that day. All of a sudden you hear something that sounds kind of like an explosion, and you look out the window and you've got 200,000 bushels of corn coming out of a bin that failed. So what would you do? What if someone's entangled in the reclaim system or in the sweep auger? What do you do? What if someone's entrapped? How do you know someone's entrapped? Do you have your person at the door that is their assistant watching them and they can alert you? What if you have not made that preparation? How are you going to know that individual is actually in the bin doing work and he can't get out? What if an explosion or fire occurs? Who do you call? The person you call, the entity that you call, are they prepared to respond? Do they know what to do? What are we going to do if we know that a major weather event is coming? Thank goodness for technology and we have early warning systems now. But your facility needs to know how do we take care of our workers and first, and secondly, our facility if it's possible. What do we do if that poses a problem? What do we do if employee has a health concern? Do we have the right 911 to call and the things to say to respond to that? Do we know that employee had a compromised health issue? What if we have a rail car derailment? That's something that we would not expect, and it can cause a big problem with your facility and certainly cause an interruption in your production. Chemical spills, workplace violence. Think about what you would do in your position, in your facility, with the response agencies that you have in your community. How is all of that going to work together? So brainstorm. This can almost be a fun activity. In fact, I think it is a fun activity. It's a committee type of planning. This is not a manager sitting in his office isolated kind of planning. I saw one location that had a really good idea. At their break room, they had a fishbowl and it had little pieces of paper in it, and each one had a what if scenario. So someone pulls out the piece of paper out of the fishbowl, and you just have a brainstorming session. What do we do if Joe is entangled in the sweep auger? What do we do if we know that we're going to have a tornado? Just some ideas and some brainstorming, and there's no wrong answers. So clearly identify the task anytime you do this brainstorming, and then tackle one thing at a time. Eat that elephant one bite at a time because you can't cure it all in one setting or one discussion. So intentionally decide what you're going to tackle that day. And then look for resources. And there are several that are attached to our Stand Up for Grain Safety website. And here's some other opportunities that have really great resources. National Grain and Feed Association, Jeeps, Grain Elevator and Processing Society, GHSC, and then your local land-grant universities have many resources available free to you. OSHA, of course, has a lot of safety resources that are quite good, and some of them come from those land-grant universities. And then one opportunity that many people don't think about is your insurance companies. They have a wealth of information that helps their customers and communities to be safe. So let's talk about an emergency action plan. If you're under the auspices of OSHA, you're required to do this, but let's consider that that's not our main motivation for having an emergency action plan. The reason we have an emergency action plan is good communication for our employees. Here's a graphic that comes from actually our Stand Up for Grain Safety website, and it gives you a little bit of an idea of the process that goes into this planning. But this is a communication tool for your employees, between management employees and back the other way. Include them in your planning, include your employees in the planning so that they have that ownership and they know how important the planning is. This is the responsibility of everybody in your facility, from the person in the scale room all the way down to the guy who sweeps the floor or back up to management. Everyone has a part to play in emergency planning. Here's another graphic that comes from the information that's on our website. Plan for emergency is specific to your work site. No two will look alike because our facilities and our people are different. We need to include all the potential emergencies that we can think of. Some emergency action plans say call 911. Well, that's good, but are you very aware of what the response team can do? Fire departments don't have to serve your facility with that particular emergency response if they're not trained for it. So we need to know for sure that they have the training they need and they know your facility well enough that they can respond. Everyone needs to know what their roles and responsibilities are, and that needs to be in writing. Do we have a communication system that will work in all of the different emergencies that we can think of? And maybe you need to practice that plan. I know in school, in grade school, and those of you who are my vintage, remember the tornado drills that we had, or the fire drills, and um, gosh, I can date myself here, but the nuclear attack drills. So our desks were our place to go. That was kind of a scary situation back then. Anyway, practice your plan and make sure that all your employees know what their role is. When we have an emergency, it's mass chaos. There's nothing more chaotic and more emotional with more adrenaline running than when we have a catastrophe in our facilities. So if we know what we're supposed to do, and we have that muscle memory or the thought process already established and practiced, then we have a much better outcome. We all go home at the end of the day. Here's another resource. This is, I believe, from OSHA. So there's the minimum requirements. If you're under OSHA, this gives you the requirements that you need to meet. And there's also a resource that helps you develop and implement your EAP, or your evacuation or emergency action plan. Emergency action plans live under the evacuation plans and procedures with OSHA. That may be kind of an inaccurate place to put it, but that's where OSHA includes this very important information. Excuse me. Let's talk about emergency responder awareness. This is something that's often overlooked because we don't want to point fingers or try to give direction to someone outside of our own organizations. But it's critical, absolutely critical, that you have some kind of connection with those emergency responders, a connection, a partnership, so to speak. Ask them out, have a pizza night, or invite them over for grilled hamburgers, and tour your facility in detail. Plan with them, show them where the electricity comes into your facility and where's the lockout tagout points. What do each one of your structures look like, and what are the particular problems that you might see with that structure. Determine the number to call and what to say for each kind of emergency. 911 operators don't get a lot of practice at grain bin entrapment or entanglement, or bin failure. That's not something that they deal with, and it's probably not even in their little flip chart of what they're supposed to do when they get a call. Does your person who's going to call the 911 or the emergency number, do they know what to say to give the right information so that your emergency responders can bring the proper equipment and know what they're supposed to do when they get there? Saves a lot of time, a lot of confusion. So it's really important to go through this step. When you're planning, make sure that your emergency responders have the training they need. Do they have high angle rescue expertise? Do they have the equipment to rescue or recover, hopefully not, but recover someone from a grain bin entrapment or engulfment? Do they have the mutual aid agreements established? When you have a crisis in a grain facility, it takes more than just your volunteer fire department locally, or even your commercial fire department. It's going to take mutual aid. So that's a planning that your emergency responders need to have in place long before an accident happens. Make sure they have enough equipment. Most volunteer fire departments don't have 1,000 feet of rope. They may have 100 feet of rope. They may need 2,000 feet of rope in order to recover or rescue someone from the bottom of a 110-foot silo. Do they have the EMT personnel? Do they have air quality monitoring? We like to think that our rescue responders have all of this equipment and know automatically how to fix all of our problems, and that is just not the truth. So we need to know that they have these expertises addressed, and they have trained properly. And when they get new people, that the new people also are educated to do their jobs when you call them to respond to your problems. So that's a communication issue. So answer the question, if the emergency happens, can that emergency response team handle it appropriately? And how long will it take for them to respond? Uh, if you're lucky, they're right across the street from your facility, but that's not the norm. So is it going to be 30 minutes before they get there? If they have a regional response group that is their technical expertise, what will your local fire department, if that's a volunteer department, this is even more critical, how long will it take for them to respond, and what are they going to do until the high tech, the emergency tech team arrives? Let's see. Okay, so our first step, if we do have an emergency, who's going to call for help? Who do they call and what do they say? How will the employees on the scene respond until emergency teams arrive? We don't want to add to our victim count. They need to know that maybe we don't go in the bin and try to save our fellow person, our fellow worker that's entrapped. It may be that we end up with two victims if they do that. So they need to know what they can and cannot do, what they should do until the emergency teams arrive. When the emergency teams arrive, they're going to take over the scene. You're no longer in charge at that point, but someone needs to be available to work with their incident commander. And that may not be the manager of the company. That may be the person that's been there the longest, that knows the facility the best. So have that planned. That's not a decision you want to make when we're in the midst of chaos in an emergency. Who's going to handle the press? This is going to be the biggest event in your town or your location, and everyone's going to show up, including the press. If you're under OSHA, OSHA will arrive. Who's going to talk with OSHA? Who's going to interact with the family? We don't need the family up there next to this crisis situation. We certainly need to provide aid to them, though. So who in your organization is going to fill that need? Who would be best to help have the family in another building away from the incident so that they can feel the best that they possibly can under this situation? It's going to be a crisis for them too. Who will manage all the sightseers? Every farmer is going to show up to see what's going on at the elevator. So who's going to manage? Who's going to direct the traffic? So what equipment can you provide? Do you have cofferdams? You're going to need shovels. Do you have a grain back? Is there one locally available, or do we need to wait a little while till we get one? Who's going to bring drinking water for everyone? Who's going to make sure we have lighting, because some of these emergencies go into the night? So those are just all ideas that you want to plan ahead and make yourself a list and educate your employees on what's going to happen when something goes wrong. Who's going to contact the insurance company? Your insurance company can be your best friend, or if you don't contact them, they can be your worst enemy. So who's going to make that contact, and who do they call and involve in this process? Assign those responsibilities and a priority to it. Who calls for the help? That's number one. List of numbers, what to say. Who's the point of contact for your responders? Who's going to direct those emergency responders? If you're in a rural location, particularly on farms, that grain bin probably is not up at the road. So who's going to be up at the road to direct people in a rural situation back to the point where we've had the crises? And then what's your company communication chain? Owners and managers don't like surprises. They need to be kept in the loop on discussions of all of this emergency response and what happens when we have a crisis. You can see the list of facility response there. I think we've already kind of gone through that, but the reason I repeat it is because it's so important. This is a list that you should be able to fill out and keep posted on the wall, or at least train your people so that they can address their position in this list. We've talked a lot about commercial facilities and those that are under the auspices of OSHA. But there's a lot of good information in the OSHA standards that apply to farms too. It just looks a little different because you don't have to be accountable in the same way. But on the farm, we have more accidents on the farm than we do in our commercial facilities. And unfortunately, a lot of them involve our children, and there's just nothing more sad than to have a child involved in one of these incidents. So do a safety analysis or a risk hazard assessment of your operation and include your family members, even the small children. Not that they can understand everything that you have to deal with, and you certainly don't want to unduly alarm them, but they need to understand that emergencies can happen in this situation, and what do they need to do to keep themselves safe? What are the do's and don'ts? And what do they need to do if a family member is in crises? Even small children can alert a neighbor or call Uncle Joe down the road if dad's in distress. So discuss with them what they need to do, and discuss with your local emergency responders. They need to know, even on the farm, what kind of hazards could happen and what will they face when they get the call to respond to your farm. So answer those questions on the previous slide, and then your planning process will be tailored to your family or to your facility. Your insurance company can help you a lot with these safety resources. Also, your local farm bureau. 4-H is a great place to get information to help your children prepare. FFA, they may be getting instruction through their FFA chapters. I know our group here at Oklahoma has worked with many FFA chapters on how to prepare for ag accidents. So you can't plan enough. Make it a family thing. I always like to talk to wives of farmers, because when we talk with them and show them the information that their family really needs to embrace, they make sure it gets done. They make sure their husband has the harness and has the information he needs, and that when he's going to go into that grain bin or a neighbor is there to help him. One of the most important things is to have someone they're available as an attendant. Make a deal with your neighbor that I'll help you if you help me when we need to go in a grain bin. Take that extra time and have a plan with someone to be there to help you. At the very minimum, make sure someone knows you're going in the bin and that you will call them in 30 minutes when you come back out. There's nothing worse than Joe doesn't show up for dinner that night because he's in the bottom of a bin and we didn't know he was in there. That's just a scenario that's heartbreaking. So that's all planning. That's all emergency planning. Everything we talk about in the grain business has to do with emergency planning. Here's another opportunity for training. This is a graphic that comes from Ohio State University, and it's very similar to the ones that I've already shown you, but this may speak to you and your facility better than some of the other graphics. It's just some of the resources available to you. So regardless of the size of your facility, whether it's commercial or on the farm, safety comes first. If it's on the farm, you cannot afford to lose a family member, either emotionally or economically or any other way we can think of. Everyone wants to go home at the end of the day, and planning is how we make that happen. Plan to be safe, but plan for the unthinkable. It's a hard thing to go through some of these scenarios. It's not going to happen to you. It never has, so it won't ever happen until it does. And I don't know how many incidents I've responded to or worked with people after the incident has happened. Every one of them says, I never thought it would happen to me, or I never thought it would happen to us. But as you talk to people, everyone has a story. They all know someone who's been in an ag accident or a grain bin accident. And the stories are all very similar in that someone did something that maybe they've done it a million times, but this time it didn't work out. Something that they should have taken a little longer to plan and have a different way of doing. Maybe we really didn't need to go in that grain bin. Maybe that The response unit wasn't trained to go in the grain bin, and had they been trained, they could have addressed it from the outside of the bin and been safe. That started our training in Oklahoma some 11 or 12 years ago when the fire department responded to an incident involving a grain bin. No reason for them to go in the bin, but ultimately what happened is one man broke his back and the fire chief died. It was an air quality issue. So those are things that you just don't think about, but you have to plan for. It's a training and education process. Everyone has a role. Everyone has a job when there's an emergency. Write it down. That's where the OSHA emergency action plan came from. Write down what needs to happen, who's going to do what. Um, if we don't write it down, it's hard to communicate. So writing it down covers two things. It makes us intentionally think through the process, which is very important. The details that need to be written down. And then we have it saved so that we can communicate to our employees and our families what needs to happen. Revisit it yearly, and certainly after each emergency. Where was the hole in our plan? What do we need to do better? What has changed in the past year? Did we add another bin? Are we handling a different product? Do we have new employees? What has changed since the last time we looked at our emergency action plan? Keep that EAP on the minds of everyone involved. That means that the process that they're responsible for is at the forefront of their thoughts. If they're the ones that's going to enter that bin, do they know what could happen to them if they do go in there? Not to be unduly cautious, but they need to know what the risks are and how we can mitigate those risks. Prevent with good housekeeping and maintenance. And if you join us on Thursday, we'll talk about good housekeeping and maintenance. Keeping your grain in good condition is absolutely your number one thing you can do to prevent accidents in grain facilities. If that grain is in good condition, it's easy to handle. It handles the way we anticipate that it will handle. It comes out of the bin the way it should. We know what to do with it. Everyone knows their job, and it's business as usual. When we do have an emergency, we want to react. We want to react efficiently, quickly, but we don't want to panic. We want to know what our job is and how we're going to do it. So, Barb, I may be getting done a little early, but I want us to have time for some questions and discussions. I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, if you could go ahead and stop your share.
Okay, I've got to find the button for that. I may have an emergency here. Stop
Here, just a minute.
share.
There we go.
All right, I did it.
All right. Um, you know, I had a question out there that how would you convert this and bring it relevance to the farm? But you hit on that now.
Oh, good.
So
I hope I answered it the way, the
you
information they need.
did. I think of some things that we may do at work. No matter what field we work in, we go to first aid training and CPR training, but are we doing that in our own that private business? Are we doing that on the farm, making sure we go do general first aid training so man, you get a big cut or something. How are you at least stopping that blood flow, taping yourself up to get to emergency situations? Our commercial vehicles require that first aid kit and fire extinguisher,
Right.
but do we have those in some of our general or personal vehicles also? Um,
That's
I
all
think
really important, Barb. And those resources are so available. The training is so available. We're really bad in my own operation. I'll admit this. We do it one time. We take the CPR training one time, first aid training one time, and that's supposed to last us a lifetime. And
yes.
so it needs to be repeated. We need to be current. And that's really good observations, Barb. Good
Um,
information.
I think back to the days of growing up on the farm and You know, kids were at home. I had five brothers and sisters. Dad and grandpa were out in the fields. I mean, he might have said in the morning, we're going to cut hay, but where? So it was, oh, calling over to grandma's farm to see if somebody could go find them. You know, we have tools these days
Yeah.
that we need to make sure we use. I kind of tease one of my sisters about all of their family is on Life 360.
Exactly. I was just going
And
to mention that.
you know what? I mean, even though we have cell phones available, if somebody's having a stroke or a heart attack, is your first response to grab your phone and call somebody? Sometimes we forget about that, but at least somebody can find you in that Life 360 app or their Snapchat app. Um, I
Do they
had a
even know
niece.
it's going to work in the grain bin? I mean,
Yeah,
if you're in steel
right.
bin, do you have
Do
a
they have
signal?
service?
Right.
So making sure that you're always telling people where you are going to be and how long it might take you
Hmm.
so that somebody's checking in with you. And if you don't
Exactly.
answer, I think we all have to be prepared to do that. Um, you
That's
know,
respect for your family too. It
yeah,
really is.
yeah, they're
Think of
they're
it in that manner. It's your responsibility to communicate with your family on what you're doing, and it might be dangerous, and they need to know that.
Here's a question, Carol. What is the first thing to do in case of a fire in grain storage, like a pellet silo?
Well, call 911, call your rescue people, your emergency people. There's not a lot you can do about a fire in a grain bin. Moving the material out of the bin, if you can, is going to be the way you're going to put that fire out. We've done a lot of research and a lot of different methods as far as water, CO2, nitrogen in the bin. None of them work 100% of the time, and most people are not geared up to do that. Uh, Letting that bin burn itself out may be your best resource for the situation. Now, the fire department, what they can do to help, they're really good at spraying water. That's what they're trained to do. We don't want to spray water in the bin because they can cause a steam explosion doing that, and it's not going to put the fire out in the grain bin. But they can keep the surrounding buildings safe, and they can keep your personnel safe. So they need to know what to do. Communication with that fire department before anything happens is really important. You don't want them to enter the bin, and you don't want them to spray water inside the bin because it's just not going to get the effect that you think it might. But they can save the rest of your facility, and that needs to be their focus at that time. Probably not a whole lot you can do other than help them understand where how your facility is built, how it's arranged, give them the information they need to do their jobs.
You know, that goes back to the points you made about inviting your fire and rescue out,
Yeah,
have that talk
so
with them
important.
ahead of time,
Yeah.
so they know, what they should and shouldn't do.
Most of them know what to do with a hay bale fire.
Mhm.
That's a very common thing that happens every year. The hay gets put up a little wet, and then we have a hay bale fire. Handling grain in a bin is very similar. You can spray water all day long on a hay bale, and you're not putting the fire out until you open that bale and move it. Same thing with the grain bin. That's the best way is to move the material out. That's a really scary thing to do. Um,
Yeah.
but many times we just have to let it burn itself out, and that takes a while, and you may risk losing that particular
Excuse
bin,
me.
but that's better than losing a life.
Um, I think Catherine may have answered it, but somebody asked, what is that gold standard out there for an emergency action plan? You know, OSHA has one, um, but uh, is there something that has has above and beyond? And Catherine posted one from UNMC and from NIOSH.
I
So
like the one from NGFA. They have a whole booklet on this in their resources, and it's very detailed, and it gives examples and forms, and That's one that I've referred to many times. So there's a lot of resources out there, but Catherine's exactly right. And then I would add NGFA to that list.
Okay, and Catherine shared NGFA as a resource earlier, so thank
Yay.
you. Um, Marlo had a great comment that they had a stop the bleed class at work. You know,
Awesome.
again, to what you said, make sure you are annually training on CPR and your standard safety classes. Um, you know, who is responsible for this emergency safety planning?
Well, commercial facilities often have a safety director, right, Barb? So um, that person would be the person that probably kicks off the process. Everyone in the facilities is responsible for emergency planning. And employees need to have a say attitude, and we work hard on that here in Oklahoma and in Texas because we have a lot of international workers. And many times they don't feel like they can, if they see something they think is dangerous or that needs improvement, they don't feel like they can tell anyone because they might get fired. That's not the environment you want in your facility. What you want them to come and be a part of the planning and to respond with anything that they see they think might not be appropriate or that might not be safe. So that's part of your safety process is involving everyone and that everyone feels safe in saying, man, I don't think that looks good, boss. Maybe we need to look at this again.
Yeah. Justin has a question. So if your local fire and rescue teams don't have entrapment rescue equipment, are there programs to help them get the equipment? And I'm going to add, and the training to do
Absolutely.
so.
Call Oklahoma State University. We help with that.
Yes, and
And
you have a
several
great
of the other
program, and
universities.
I've seen it
Um,
many times.
your insurance company is a good resource also. Many times, larger companies, grain companies have donated the equipment to the fire departments. Some insurance companies have that equipment available that they can donate. But yeah, your first step is call your insurance company, I would think. And then resources through Jeeps, especially. There's training available. Uh, there's enough work for all of us doing training to work till the cows come home, you know. But there are some commercial opportunities out there. Satra is one of them, and I hate to list them because there's many, and I'll forget somebody. They're all good. Many of the land grant universities have opportunities, just like Oklahoma State does. We have a big trailer that we come out and set up. It has 2 grain bins on it, and we talk about how to work safely in a grain bin and also how to get someone out if they're entrapped. So we also cover things like lockout, tagout. I didn't talk a lot about lockout, tagout, but I can tell you from an emergency standpoint, we'd almost be out of business if everybody would lock out, tag out. It's just that
Yeah.
important. It's that important. So make sure you have the equipment for it and that your employees know they have to do it. It's just that important.
Yeah, you know, I think you mentioned earlier we don't have to know somebody, but we all do that
Yeah.
has, you know, again, lost a finger, lost a hand, lost a foot, whether it's
Um,
at commercial work, at your farm work, because you know, it's just a quick clog in the baler
ah,
or, you
that's
know,
right.
quick clog in the combine header, and you don't shut things down, you don't lock things out, or, you know, lock out, tag out on a vehicle, turn it off, pull the
Turn
key,
it off.
chalk
Yeah,
the wheels so that it
exactly.
doesn't move while you're fixing it. Again, all of these things in emergency planning. Josh had a question that kind of goes back with this last one. What have folks done in areas where emergency response isn't adequate? They train teams internally. Um,
Exactly.
and I just want to, you know, I guess toot our own horn. Our company has um, rope rescue
Mhm.
trailers all throughout our 3-state territory, and they continuously train. I will say, fortunately or unfortunately, they've been called on by the fire departments to come out
Right.
and either do the rescue or sometimes in numerous cases it is to do the recovery.
Yeah.
Um, so there are resources out there, even if you don't do a full, full trailer, full, high angle training, to have those tools, whether it's having a cofferdam, having a tripod,
Mm-hmm.
that you can get a harness to somebody, get a rope rescue line, and do some of those trainings internally, go out to your own facilities
Absolutely.
and understand where those points are.
That
Um,
training that's available for emergency units is also available to elevators and to farm people. We love it when
yes,
farm folks show up, because so many incidents do happen where they don't have access to rescue services in time or at all. And so there's a lot that they can do. They need, but it's all planned ahead of time. You can't do that when the accident happens. I've worked with your CVA folks and they're top notch, Barb. They're good folks. They know what they're doing, and you're so blessed to have them there and you share it with your community. Much of the equipment for the farmers can, if they call the local elevator, there may be some equipment there that they can use. And then when you mentioned cofferdams, there is no excuse for every farm and grain handling facility in the world to not have a cofferdam available. Hopefully you never need it. I hope to God you never need it. But if you do, you can, if you've got one available, it saves so much time, and you can make with one sheet of plywood, you can make 5 pieces of a cofferdam, and that will save someone's life. So, for the cost of a sheet of plywood, you're in business.
yeah. Justin, going back to how do we get there, equipment, there are different organizations, as Carol mentioned. I am not promoting a particular insurance company, but I do know in kind of like January, February, Nationwide has
Right.
um a national kind of grain safety week, and they do um have, I don't know if you'd call it a contest, but you can write in and fill out an application to get training equipment for
Right.
your local fire department. So in a sense, you are saying, hey, here's our rural fire department, and they need some equipment and training. Y'all got to have the
Yep.
training to
Gotta
know
have
how
the
to use
training.
it.
Yeah.
But yeah, keep an eye out for those kind of things
I think Triangle
online.
Insurance does something
Mm,
very similar. Triangle is very prominent here in this part of the United States, and they have opportunities for their clients also, and they're more than willing to come out. They would much rather come out and help you plan and train than to respond to an incident when it happens. So
yes.
they're a great, all of your insurance companies are great resources, and they can help you with that equipment. Another point, one fire department's not going to have all the equipment that they
Mm,
need. That it's just too much, and it's a low incident accident. They don't see that they see a lot more car accidents and house fires than they see problems in our grain bin. And that's kudos to the industry because we do a good job for the most part. But they're not going to spend the money if they have limited resources, they won't spend the money on low incident response opportunities. And so you may have to help them get that equipment and then work with fire departments surrounding them so they can put all their resources together uh, to have a collection of the equipment they need and the training.
I think Butch, you've worked with Butch Hendricks many
Oh my
times.
gosh, yes.
But he had said, again, they have great opportunities where they train at elevators and fire
Yeah.
departments. And Butch, if you put in there what state you're from, Butch, so people know know who to call. But
Be sure and call Butch. The guy
okay,
is an
yeah,
expert.
he's in
He's the greatest.
Indiana. Catherine put Illinois Fire Service Institute has training available. There is one in Ohio. There's one in northern Iowa. So kind of Google out there. There's many good fire department training centers. Now, a lot of them they may not be training on grain bins, especially. So
Mhm.
that really goes back to Carol's point. Have them out to your facility.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
because every facility is different. And you think of a lot of our local fire departments, especially in the cooperative world, some of those volunteer firemen are farmers. They're the
Hmm.
producers that drive their semis into our
Yeah.
facilities.
Yep.
And we had one ask as we were doing a tour. So he said, hey, if I show up, at one of our small country elevators, he said, yeah, if I show up with the truck and I don't see you around, are you saying I shouldn't go down to find you? And we said, no,
Oh,
because you have to have the air monitor on. You could
that's
be
right.
walking into
You might have two
this.
victims.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
So those are very important. People are well-meaning, but they have to be well-trained.
Well, that's true. There's
Mm.
many times we've in increased our victim count with well-meaning people. And sometimes that's even a fireman. If it they're they're trained to save people, and if they don't know what they're doing, they're one we have to save. So very good points, Barb. And there's no one right answer that fits everybody, but planning
No.
is so critical, and thinking, brainstorming and thinking about the what ifs. That's not a fun thing to do, but it's so important that we think about it and what we're going to do, and do we have the equipment and the right people. And it never ends, because our personnel changes and our facilities change. The
Mhm.
laws change sometimes.
Yes.
And so we need to keep on top of that, along with all the other millions of things we have to do.
I want to point out a comment in there, and thank you, James, for bringing this up. They said they had a dust explosion
Yeah.
in the recent past, and their local fire department had them enter out their loadout directly after. And there was a lot of dust when this happened.
Mhm.
And said the loadout shouldn't have been emptied that way. And he said, I think it's important to speak up if you know that the decision is wrong. Luckily, there wasn't
Absolutely.
another explosion. So,
Yeah.
thank you again, James, for pointing that out. Our safety and everybody else's safety, um, counts on us speaking up.
It's communication. All of this is communication. And say, yes, you're the expert on your facility. And firemen, with the exception of our farmers who are volunteer fire departments and all, um, more and more, we don't have ag people on our fire departments. Many times they've never been around grain. All they know is what they've read in the press, and that may be accurate or not. And so helping them understand what your environment is like, and speaking up when you see something. Like I say, you are the expert on
Yeah.
that grain. You are the expert. And most of the time, the fire departments recognize that. Sometimes you have to get a little forceful to let them know that you know what you're talking about. But
Yeah.
generally, they want that knowledge. But be don't be afraid to speak up. I'm glad
That
James
was a
said
comment
that.
out there that
Absolutely.
said, remember that a lot of our rural rescue squads are volunteers, so we need
Yeah,
to keep them safe too. Um,
absolutely. In Oklahoma, we have very few paid fire departments. About, I would say, 90% of our fire departments are volunteer.
mhm.
And it's very hard for them to get all the training that they need. But one thing they need to be aware of is that their trench rescue and their confined space rescue training has a lot of overlap with grain facility training. So if they think about the skills they have in their basic training, they may be able to use those skills to help you with your emergency.
Yes. Um, Sam just posted a little link for us that the Kentucky Department of Ag
Mhm.
conducts training. So again, to the questions
Great.
out there, I bet we can find a lot of resources, kind of if
Absolutely.
we know where to look. We are coming up on our time here. So again, thank you, Carol, for all that great information. And
Thanks for
thank you for
asking me.
people's comments. Thank you
Yes,
for people's questions and for your engagement today. Catherine has already started posting out in the chat box. You can get a certificate for today. Just download that Word document out of the chat. Just hit the little download button if you hover on it, and that is fillable. Since this is a Word document, you can add your name or those that you're attending. You can go out the standupforgrainsafety.org website and register your participation in this week in general. And again, we've got the chat up here for a few minutes. There was a lot of great resources and links that people were posting in the comments. So thank you very much. Again, one of the important things that to me of Stand Up for Grain Safety Week is that everybody is coming together. So sharing their resources, and that is very important. Not everybody has the funds to create their own resources, but there's a lot of awesome resources out there that are being offered for free. Again, Carol is a great resource to us in this industry, not only doing training, but also, you go on site, like you said, you do forensics, you come in
absolutely.
after and
You've
take
got
care
my
of things for
email
us.
and contact me through Barb, and we can talk over the phone. I can make a visit. This is this is this is something we all need to work at together. And I'm certain if I can help, I certainly want to be available.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for joining the session today. Reminder, there is a Spanish language session this afternoon on this topic. So make sure to share with your Spanish speaking employees or friends so they can jump on. Thank you again, Carol, and we hope everybody has a great day.
And stay safe.